What does it actually mean to be human? Today's guest is someone who has spent over 25 years working in mental health. He has witnessed people at their absolute lowest.
People just finding they're trying to search for some sort of safety, and they want to feel held, if you like, and not judged. What's inside you defines you as a person.
Naming the emotion that you're currently going through actually relaxes the brain's system.
There's no bad feeling. You know, they're all good feelings. They're all there for a reason. You know, it's what makes us human.
What do you think we have misunderstood about being human?
You know, humanity is fragile. It's also resilient. We all ache for that belonging. You know, when people go for psychotherapy or something like that, a lot of the time they're being brought back to a place where they were with the intention of it being viewed differently.
Language and the choice of word also plays a very huge role, because that really shifts the whole spotlight from the problem to actually to the person who went through it and get all right and shiny. Before we begin today's conversation, I want to share something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I think every single one of us is trying to understand ourselves. Sometimes we call it healing. Sometimes we call it growth. Sometimes we call it finding ourselves. But if you really strip everything back, I think we are all trying to answer one question throughout our entire lives. What does it actually mean to be human? And that's exactly what today's episode is about. Hi, my beautiful soul. It's Miss K, and welcome back to the Uncaged Mind podcast. It's truly an honor to have you here. And if this is your first time listening, thank you so much for choosing to spend a part of your day with me. Now, before we begin, I want to tell you what today's episode is not about. This episode is not about diagnosing mental illnesses. It's not about complicated clinical terms, nor it is a lecture about mental health. Instead, this is a conversation about people, about you, about me, about why we behave the way we do, why we suffer the way we do, and ultimately, what decades of witnessing human struggle can teach us about ourselves. Because if there is one thing I've realized while creating Uncaged Mind, it's that sometimes the greatest wisdom does not come from textbooks. It comes from people who have spent their years quietly observing humanity unfold in front of them. And today, we have exactly that person. Today's guest is someone who has spent over 25 years working in mental health, supporting people during some of the most vulnerable, difficult, life-altering moments they will ever experience. He has witnessed people at their absolute lowest, but also has witnessed incredible resilience, recovery, and extraordinary capacity that human beings have to keep going despite adversity. Originally from England, Mark trained at University College Northampton before moving to Australia in 2006, where he has since worked across Western Australia, the Northern Territory, Queensland, and Victoria in acute, forensic, and community health settings. But what I admire most is that his work does not stop at clinical practice. He's also an educator, an author, a podcast host, a certified Reiki practitioner, and someone who genuinely believes that mental health conversations should be accessible to everyone. He hosts the podcast, No Nonsense Psychiatry, where he breaks down mental health in a practical and approachable way. And he has also authored several books, including So You Want to Be a Mental Health Nurse, 50 Days to Change Your Mindset, and The Mental Health Toolkit. But beyond all of those credentials, what I think makes today's episode so special is this. For 25 years, Mark has had a front row seat to humanity. He has seen people during moments they never imagined they would have entered. And because of that, he carries a perspective that many of us simply don't get access to every day. And that's why I genuinely believe that if you listen closely today, you won't just learn something about mental health. You'll learn something about yourself. So, Mark, first of all, welcome to the Uncaged Mind podcast.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to do this.
So, as I am, I'm very, very grateful that you agreed to do this collaboration. And I also want to say a huge thank you to you because this is actually Uncaged Mind's very first guest episode and very first video podcast as well. So I'm incredibly grateful that you're the person I get to share this milestone with.
Thank you.
No worries. So before we dive into everything, Mark, I want you to directly speak to the people who's listening right now.
Yeah.
The person who's maybe feeling overwhelmed or constantly overthinking, questioning themselves, trying to navigate life, or simply, understand themselves a little bit better.
Yeah.
What do you think they might learn about themselves from today's conversation? And how could their lives change if they truly observe what you're about to say today?
I think it comes in two parts, that kind of question. And looking at people today, for the last 25 years, it's a big span. But I guess a lot of people still believe that strength means being hard and silent, and but I think that belief kind of hurts a lot of people, and real strength is something that is much softer. That is honesty, and it's about staying, I guess, human under pressure. But I think what people might learn today is that you are allowed to keep going. You can keep going when things become unbearable, and you keep going by making the situation that you're thinking about smaller, and concentrating on the next hour, or sometimes even just taking a breath. What keeps them going isn't something that's grand and fantastic and some huge wand that is going to come and wave it all away. It's usually one person, one reason, and just that small moment of light where clarity becomes much clearer, and the waters are not so muddied. So that's what I'm kind of hoping people will get from today's talk. Yeah.
I absolutely love that answer. And one thing particularly that you said that really caught my attention, real strength is being soft. How beautiful is that? Yeah. And one thing that really stood out to me when I was listening to your podcast is how much genuine care you have for this entire field. And I really don't mean it in a surface way. Because one thing I noticed is that you're taking all these, complex mental health, psychiatry, and human behavior, and you're making them accessible to everyday people.
Yes.
Like you're almost acting as like a bridge between professional and to the general public. And honestly, I think that's such an important thing because mental health should not just exist in clinics or textbooks or, professional spaces. It should be a conversation that everybody feels included in.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that, when you meet people for the first time, a lot of what they're telling you is that they've struggled to get help or they haven't been able to find help. And there is this whole plethora of help. But I think a lot of things go wrong. Without trying to get too political, I think a lot of services don't talk to each other, so they don't promote each other. And I think that a lot of organisations will want a diagnosis of some sort to start with, when I don't believe that that's where you should be starting. I think we should be starting with, how are you feeling? And then exploring how we can make those feelings a bit more bearable, because at the end of the day, it's really hard to take a problem away, but it's easier, I guess, if people can be spoken to on a human level with some honesty, to soften the actual experience rather than pathologizing it and saying that you've got this and that. And, you may well have all those things, but I think you should be able to explore it. And that's why I hoped my podcast would do, allow people just that bit of breathing, that bit of a break in their thinking to think about it differently.
Absolutely. Because from my perspective, when we talk about mental health, it's a lot about pathologizing the human rather than actually treating the human being as they are. Because when we come up with one problem, we are given all these prescriptions and then the ticking boxes, and then we're treated like we are some kind of to-do list that needs to be completed rather than actually understanding what's going on and why are we feeling the way we are feeling.
Yeah.
And that genuinely needs a human connection to understand.
Absolutely.
Which you have over the decades proved it, and you have been doing it continuously through your podcast and your books. So it's an incredible journey to witness.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we dive into all of the wisdom and experiences you have accumulated over these decades, what I actually want to talk about is the beginning. Because I think we often, see someone with decades of experience and immediately focus on where they are right now. But we really take a moment to understand where it all started. So I want you to take us back 25 years ago. When you first stepped into this profession, what was mental health scene back then like? And now looking fast forward 25 years after, what has changed the most? And what are the things that, despite everything, have remained exactly the same?
Well, being young and I guess younger in my mind and less exposure to mental health, I guess I had preconceptions about things. I probably sounded like I would probably be one of those people that would carry on the stigma of mental health, how I would think it would be. Because I first started working as a healthcare assistant before I trained to be a nurse. So going onto the ward, it was quite a frightening experience. And that's because I was naive and I didn't understand it. I quickly adapted to that and realized that I actually do have a lot of experience with communicating with people. And before becoming a nurse, I worked in retail, so I was very used to dealing with people with complex problems, difficult people, happy people, and maybe even sell into that ego. So I guess the transition into a nurse was easier for me because I realized, as I say, very quickly that it's really just about communication. So I guess that's the real difference, as opposed to, moving to now. I don't see any person as broken, and I don't see that they, just because they have a mental health issue, it doesn't mean that that's it. That defines them. I think that, a lot of people, they try to survive what happens to them, and they, as I think I was talking to you previously about, the symptoms are usually a coping mechanism that they've expanded on, and they've kind of built on the foundation of that coping mechanism, and it's now become one of the problems where, and that may be avoiding going out, avoiding going to see friends, becoming less social and then feeling isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that, that's kind of been a consistent presentation with most mental health issues. I'm not talking about mental health diagnosis like schizophrenia or bipolar. I'm talking about everyday mental health, and a lot of people will use these coping mechanisms. So I think, that's what I kind of see as being consistent. But, human suffering itself hasn't really changed in that time at all. But I think what has changed is the environment we live in. It's now faster, it's harder, it's harder to escape. It's all there in your phone, your fingertips. So growing up in the 70s, 80s, we didn't have computers and computer games. You can kind of see how younger people today are permanently in a state of getting hits of dopamine and cortisone and adrenaline because they're forever looking for the next thing that's going to make them feel good or make them laugh or make them cringe or, whatever they might be, whatever their interest may be. So, that symptom has now become a strategy, as I say, which now makes sense. But they're much more capable of change than they think. So I guess I'm less interested in trying to fix people, I guess, because it's really hard to fix something. I'm more interested in helping them feel safe enough to find their strength. And human beings are really resilient. You know, they can carry a lot, and it's amazing to see people take a few breaths, attempt a meditation, go for a walk, or whatever they might want to do to try and escape whatever feeling they've got, and come back a more resilient person. So I think I've changed in my attitude over the 25 years, and I don't think that's changed. I don't think the mental health system as such, it still runs as a system that's built for 1970s. But I think what has changed is our environment that we're in is very different. And I can see why people get overwhelmed by it sometimes, you know?
Absolutely. That's the point that's really striking to me, to be honest, because as compared to, 25 years ago when you were practicing as a mental health nurse, we have a lot more resources and a lot more help literally in our fingertips. Do you think that sometimes, backfires us because we have all these resources and overwhelming amount of content telling us what we are rather than we ourselves analyzing what we are really going through? We barely even have time to sit with ourselves and analyze what's going through in our own minds. And we're just consuming all this content about mental health and different kinds of mental illnesses. Do you think that is a backfire set against us?
Absolutely. I actually do think that does backfire on many occasions, because I think that, if I give you an example of an everyday child now, they get home, parents are home, or they've arranged a sitter, they'll have dinner prepared for them, they'll have their screen time to occupy them, and everything will be fine. And they don't have to do much thinking about it. Okay, it's kind of all taken care of because we have all these things in place that protect children, which we should, rightly so. When I was growing up, when I got home, there was no one home. I had a key, it was around my neck. I let myself into the house. If I wanted something, I'd open up a tin of beans. I'd learn how to open up a tin of beans. We didn't have the pool lids. We had to use the can opener, and it wasn't electric either. So, and make some beans on toast or something, and wait for mum and dad to get home. So I kind of feel like resilience is something that we can work out ourselves. I think we're very capable as human beings to be able to work out ourselves. But I think what we've done is that we've given this whole system and tried to cover every single base, which we can't. And I'm not just talking about mental health services. I'm talking about all services where everything's got a link, a different department, a special department. You're protected against this, you're protected against that, so that we kind of make people a little bit dependent on these services, where I think, before people were kind of left to their own devices a bit. And, I'm not saying that you should be left to your own devices. You can work it all out. I think if you need help, you need help. But I just think that perhaps it's too easy to think that someone's going to be at the other end of the phone, or too easy to think that this tablet's going to fix this, or it's too easy because I've got that service. And it's not that easy, because you still need the most important thing, which we're talking about today, which is that human connection.
Absolutely. As we're having this conversation, something just clicked in my mind. Despite, all these advances we've made as society, so many people still seem very exhausted, disconnected, and overwhelmed. From your perspective, what do you think people are actually struggling underneath all that?
Yeah, I think underneath all that anxiety and sadness, most people I feel are just finding they're trying to search for some sort of safety, and they want to feel held, if you like, and not judged. They want to know that they don't have to carry it all alone, and they want some steadiness inside that chaos, and they want their pain to mean something. That's what I kind of feel that people with general mental health issues are kind of at. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but that's on a broad sense. I feel that's where it kind of sits.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. One thing you mentioned that really strike with me is we are all looking for safety underneath all of that.
Yeah.
I think that's a blessing, but at the same time, that's a tragedy as a human being because we are surrounded with chaos all the time that even if we finally find that safety, we seem to manipulate it. So for the listeners who might be going through the same phase, where safety might be feeling like chaos to them, what would you say would be the first step back to themselves and feeling safe within themselves first?
I think when you look at the way people react, they'll turn to certain things, external things. They'll turn to TV. They'll turn to their mobile phone. They'll turn to alcohol, maybe some sort of sexual gratification. They'll find something, some sort of vice to distract them, but they look for that distraction externally. And I think that's where a lot of the time it kind of starts to cave in on itself because you've got to continue doing it. That might be, some people might use drugs or some people might drink a lot, so you kind of feel that that's kind of like yes, it's solving the problem. It's bringing that I'm feeling safe. I'm feeling settled. Oh, I just need a drink to chill out. I just have one smoke. It just stops all that, But I think what they should be doing is looking inside themselves because all the answers are there inside yourself. We all know what's good and bad for us. We all know what's right and wrong for us. And we all know what's human about ourselves. And, and that also includes having a bit of compassion for yourself as well. And, seeing that you are human and you make mistakes, but absolutely none of those things define you as a person. What's inside you defines you as a person. So I think, as much as people will seek fixes, I think they miss the main one, which is in the mirror.
Absolutely. So looking inside is the first step on our healing journey, let's say.
Yes.
How do we actually look inside?
Well, there's lots of ways to look at it really when you're looking inside yourself. It's about breaking down. I mean, a lot of it is hard work and it's not an easy fix. You might create some sort of mood diary, for instance, okay? So you might measure your mood throughout the day and 10 being really good and 0 being at the flattest. So if you were to look at yourself every now and then and honestly say to yourself, okay, how do I feel at the moment? Oh, I feel a bit anxious. I feel like I've got lots on my mind and I can't get it out. Oh, okay, what can I do? I'm going to go and try and have a walk. Okay, so I go and have a walk and then I come back from the walk and say, how do I feel? Oh, I feel about a 4. Okay, so what can we do to help that? Maybe I'll distract myself. I'll do a bit of reading or something. Go and do a bit of reading or watch a bit of TV, whatever, and then come back and say in an hour's time, say, how do I feel now? Oh, I feel about 3. Oh, that's kind of working. That's good. That's brilliant. Okay, so then you might measure it again. It might be a 3, a 3, a 3, and then at night time it might still get to worse. So I think what you do is you look at yourself and you start to build your own strategies to minimize what's actually happening to you, the way you're feeling. So it could be that you, instead of going up and down 100 times a day in your mood, you might find yourself, being a bit more balanced in it. And that's just a small snippet of what you can do to look inside yourself. I mean, personally, my favorite thing is to meditate and be grateful and look at gratitude, all the things that I do have, all the things that I have achieved, all the things, and not buttering myself up, but I might say I'm actually a good person. I helped that person when they couldn't grab the car keys and, open the door for them when they went through the shopping centre or something, And I think, that's how you closely look at yourself. When you constantly look at the negative aspects of your life, you're kind of looking for the external to try and make it right, where really you can actually change your way of thinking by just thinking about yourself differently.
Absolutely. And one thing that I recently read in an article, which you exactly pointed out, is naming the emotion that you're currently going through actually relaxes the brain's system. Is that true?
That is true, yes. Because I think, you take ownership of that feeling. I'm feeling angry, you know. There's no bad feeling. They're all good feelings in the sense that they're all there for a reason. It's what makes us human. When we feel scared, we're scared about something. When we feel anxious, we're anxious about something. Now, that's not to say that we sometimes might be overly anxious. Okay, when we've had a sharp drop of fight or flight, we might become overly anxious. But again, it's like, oh no, I'm feeling anxious at the moment. Okay, right, I'm feeling anxious. What can I do about that?
Absolutely.
Do I need to take a tablet? You could, but you could also just jump in the shower and just have a quick shower. 5 minutes, have a shower and feel better. Without taking a tablet. The tablets have their places, but I think resilience by being more introspective is going to help you much more than a tablet.
I think it just goes in like naming the problem actually solves half the problem. Yeah. And that also applies to our human experiences.
Yes.
We just kind of think like whenever we feel overwhelmed or stressed or full of anxiety, that's actually a bad emotion. But as you said, no emotion is bad emotion. It's just human emotion.
That's right.
We need to really accept that and analyze what we can do afterwards, after feeling that emotion.
Yeah.
Which leads up to, how we are all just so into healing nowadays. Like we are constantly trying to evolve. But sometimes I feel like we have become so obsessed with just fixing ourselves that we have forgotten actually how to be human. Like, have you noticed that too? And what do you think we have misunderstood about being human?
It truly means to be human is fragile and kind of resilient at the same time. To love, to lose, to ache, to hope. That need for belonging is more than we admit, really, and we need to remember that being wounded by something doesn't mean that we're not worthy to be the people that we are. It doesn't mean that we're not worthy for help or for cure or to feel the opposite of that, and to keep going as well. I guess I've come a little bit more hopeful about humanity, not because life is easy, but because I've seen what people can bring to their game when they're down on their knees, that resilience. And I've seen extraordinary tenderness from the most darkest of places, and people still remaining human. And that's why I still believe in people, I guess, when it comes to like that. Humanity is fragile. It's also resilient. We all ache for that belonging. We all get wounded by pain, and still we keep reaching for things like love and connection.
Exactly. What I do feel like is because of the content online and all of the noise around us surrounding different ideas and opinions, we kind of like lost the track of actually being human, what it looks like. We are just treating ourselves as a project that needs to be completed rather than actually understanding what human beings really feel deep down. Sort of like machines. We operate as machines, but we time to time forget that we are ecosystems. We go through, seasons. We go through different phases. We go through autumn, spring, just like Earth, nature.
Yeah.
We have different coping mechanisms, as we talked about. We have strength and resilience. I think that's a very missed out part on being human, because we live in a very fast-paced world right now. We get caught up in our everyday activities, trying to, focus on our tasks, because it is constantly the same. Our to-do list, and then the day, we have 24 hours, but we have the same tasks that we need to do every single day. So in all of that chaos, we actually forget that we are human at the end. We might not feel the same as we do every single day. So that's a very beautiful point that you brought up. But can you walk through what healing actually looks like? Because due to all of these social media contents, it looks very pleasing. It looks very aesthetic, like doing yoga, meditation, sipping the tea during the bed and journaling. But can you please walk us through what healing actually looks like? Does it look very aesthetic and pleasing like that as it is being showcased?
I think if you're going to go through and meditate and feel better for it at the end of it, which is possible, I think, for that particular period, that season, if you like, you might go through that season of feeling rejuvenated. But I think it doesn't take away what put you there in the first place. And I think it's like, if I was to tell you a funny joke, okay, you might laugh. If I was to tell you the same funny joke, you might laugh. After about the fifth, sixth time, chances are you're not going to be laughing anymore. And I think the emotion works the other way as well. I think sometimes, when people go for psychotherapy or something like that, a lot of the time they're being brought back to a place where they were with the intention of it being viewed differently and that graded exposure to it becoming less and less and less. But initially it's going to hurt. When I say hurt, I don't mean painful hurt. I mean like it's going to make you cringe, or, if it's something you're ashamed of, it's going to make you cringe. But over time you'll forgive yourself and that healing process will become less intense, and you will find a medium where you can actually go, yeah, look, I did a terrible thing. I cheated on my wife, whatever, and she left me. I now know that I will never, ever do that again. I know what hurt it caused her. I know what hurt it's caused me and my children. And in my next relationship, I won't make the same mistakes. Do you know what I mean? That is kind of like a healing process, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, even when you do make mistakes and go through that healing process, you might fall down again. But again, that's part of being human. We haven't learned that lesson enough there, so we need to come back and readdress it or find different ways to approach it. So healing is not something that's so smooth, linear. I start here, I finish here, everything's great. No, it goes up and it goes around, and sometimes you have to avoid it and take a different route. Healing is a journey, but it's best shared with somebody. You can fix yourself, but you don't have to.
A major part of healing involves you looking back to what it caused, the triggers you're getting in, and then analyzing by time, not forcing yourself to heal all of a sudden.
Oh,
but
God.
as you said, coming back to it, having different perspectives, time and again, and then finally accepting that fact and then moving on from it as well.
It's like I've spoken to a lot of guys in jail, and, not everybody in jail is a bad person. They've just made a bad choice. They've made a poor choice, and that's where they've ended up. And they could be anybody sitting in there, you and me, whoever could be sitting in that jail. As much as it frightens the hell out of me, I would never want to go and be on that side of the fence. But, some people go back and they go back and they go back. And one guy was saying to me, I've wasted my life. I've spent the last 20 years in jail. And a lot of times I could have got out, but I've just come straight back in again, feeling quite sorry for himself, And I said to him, wow, you are really quite a resilient person, eh? Because I'm not too sure if I could have survived that. But you've survived that. You're a survivor. You've actually done really well. Yes, you've made the same mistakes, but you're still here and you're seeking help. How good are you? You're amazing. And it's having that kind of perspective on things that sometimes when we see things in our healing journey, we kind of think that it's something that's really bad and shameful, when really it can be a positive trait. I'm not saying you should find the positive in everything, because sometimes you have to learn by your mistakes and you have to feel what other people might have felt from what you might have done or said or whatever to understand it. And I think that's important as well. And we shouldn't shy away from owning our feelings, owning our emotions, owning what we've done. We've got to take a lot of responsibility for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that you can control in your life is what you think and how you perceive it. You might have someone that has got a day off and they perceive that it's a bad day off because it rained all day. Yeah, and they've wasted their day. And you might have a different person living next door that's growing tomatoes. It's rained all day and he's absolutely wrapped. He can't believe it. It's the best day of his life. His tomatoes are going to get the watering they need. Same rain.
Absolutely.
And that's what it's about. It's about recognizing that whatever's happening to you doesn't define you.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you feel about it that day.
I feel a lot of things in our life really depends on our perspectives as well. It heavily depends on how we view a situation, and that can really shape our mindset and our whole nervous system on just the basis of how we are interpreting a given situation. And
Yeah.
that really has a major impact in our mental health, I believe.
Yes.
As we're talking, one particular word really struck with me when you were sharing the experience of the person you met from the jail.
Yeah.
That term is survivor. And that's such a heavy word, to be honest, because that really shifts the whole narrative from the victim mindset to someone who is resilient and who is able to make it out even through adversity. So I think language and the choice of word also plays a very huge role as a mental health professional, as well as in a general perspective as well, because that really shifts the whole spotlight and the whole, concentration from the problem to actually to the person who went through it, and they're all bright and shiny.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's terminology as well. It's how you word things. As a professional, I know talking to somebody, my conversation can go completely pear shaped if I use the wrong word. I think you're absolutely right. Using words like survivor, for instance, it really puts that problem that they had actually in such a good light. It's like, wow, yeah, actually, I have survived this. I'm still here, and I'm still trying to work it out. I haven't given up. I'm a strong person. That kind of.
Exactly. I think people really do not see how resilient and how much they're capable until it's really shown to them.
Yes.
Like, we all have gone through major traumatic situations and adversities in life.
Yeah.
But whenever we realize it, we have this sense of optimism and a feeling like, yes, I can make it through adversity, right? So I think choice of wording and the way we interpret the situation and circumstances really means a lot in mental health setting.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
As we're talking about resilience a lot, there's something, I've always been curious about. Like, you've met a lot of people during some of the hardest moments of their lives, yet you've also witnessed incredible resilience. What have those people taught you about resilience that most people don't understand? Because I think a lot of us associate resilience with being strong all the time. But I have a feeling that it might be something completely different.
Look, and I think it's what I was saying before about resilience. Resilience is not about becoming what you were before. It's about being changed by what's happened to you and still moving forward. It's kind of like carrying that truth of what's happened, but accepting it and then thinking, how can I live with that now? And that's what resilience is. It's not about saying you're forgiven. It's not about saying that's okay now, it's all put to bed. Resilience is about having a bad situation and then learning from that situation and being able to cope with it. And if it ever happened again, or a similar situation comes up with you there, it's about built-in small choices, if you like. You're using small choices to kind of counter that with resilience, and you kind of start to rebuild a meaning from what initially broke them, And I think people, the limits of people's endurance is incredible. People can survive far more than they think they can. And I've seen people reach the edge of themselves, I guess, and still keep going. And endurance is rarely a loud thing. It's really like, look at me, how great I'm doing. It's a quiet thing. It's one breath of like holding back from shouting at somebody if they've annoyed you. It's 1 hour of walking away from a relationship problem that you've got, or some conflict that you've had at work. It's a step away from somebody that's confronted you about something, or something that's you've seen that you don't like. That's kind of resilience. And they're the small things, the very small things that you notice about yourself that kind of that prove that resilience is there.
That is so true, because one of the most resilient people I've known in my life, I think they debunk this myth of being resilient as, being the pillar of strength all the time. It's about going through adversity at any given point in your life, and your ability to cope with it and bounce back to the normal state and even being better than the previous one.
I think, like, in my time when I've kind of been dealing with conflict and people in my work setting, sometimes I think it surprises people that are being maybe hostile or aggressive or rude, whatever, of how calm I am. And I think it's a choice. I could easily play into that. Someone's having a go at me, telling me how terrible I am, and I could come back and say, well, you don't get out of bed in the morning, if you've made your room and wasn't tired, wouldn't be on your back about it, blah, 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 whatever it might be, It's having that calm and that silence, really, that time to go, okay, I'll come back to you in a minute when you've got that out of your system, and we'll try and talk about it again, because I just want to talk to you about it, And I think that's a sign of growth. And you see that with a lot of patients that have got anger management issues, or they get into lots of conflict with partners, or they have failed relationships, whatever it might be. And it's about having that sense of mind, that resilience to go, I know they've just called me the worst name in the world, but, it's just, it doesn't define me. That's just what they've called me. That's their perception. It's not mine. I'm going to walk away and come back in 10 minutes. That's growth. That's resilience.
Absolutely. Another thing, as we're talking about human behavior and experiences, would be, I think we're all constantly searching for something. Some people are searching for success, or some people are searching for relationships, validation, or simply some might be just searching for peace. But at the end, we are all searching for something. After you've seen a lot, what do you think human beings are actually searching for underneath all of that?
I think most people, as I said back in the beginning, I think most people are kind of looking for connection. And I think that they're more afraid of suffering if it's facing the suffering on their own. I think most people are afraid of pain and facing it by themselves. People can endure a lot when they feel seen. If someone acknowledges, oh, that must have been really hard for you. Oh, that sounds like a really difficult situation. That's the validation. They're looking for that validation, aren't they? And I think what breaks them is the feeling that no one will stay with them when they're in it. People leave me, and then connection, I guess, if you look at the connection side of it, it makes that pain a bit more bearable. I guess, like, a problem shared is a problem halved, and isolation, I think, is probably the one the thing that makes things most suffering for people. And when I've had people coming into me, they talk about middle-aged men talk about feeling lonely when they don't have their partner anymore, they're not working anymore, they've lost their job, or they've been unemployed or on work cover, whatever it might be. And the part of them that gets the most is, they've got this, there might be a work cover instance. Say, for instance, they damage their ankle, they can't walk, so they can't do their job. If that's been someone's job for the last 30 years and they've really enjoyed it, and there they were somebody that was, oh, that's John. John's always the guy. He knows everything about this place. John, what do I do about this? And he's had all that his whole life. Or, he comes home and his wife's there, and she says, oh, did you have a nice day at work? Would you mind putting the washing on while I make dinner? That kind of thing. They've had that connection. Kids are there, and they have that connection. And then when that all gets taken away, say during for work cover, they go from this quite happy, outgoing person to quite a lonely person. They may not have their wife there. Maybe she left him because he wasn't working, started drinking. His kids are grown up and left home. He's got no job. He's got no connection. So then that pain and suffering becomes something that he's got by himself. And I think just having someone there to share it with is something that they're really I think they're suffering. I think that's what they're really craving. To have somebody else there. I feel that people do need that stillness and time to pursue things, real stillness. But again, most people chase noise, distraction, and they chase other things for validation.
I think what we forget in the middle of, achieving everything is that human beings, by default, we are social animals. We have this natural tendency to incline towards social connection, human to human connection. But we are in an era, we're forcing ourselves to just isolate and do everything by ourselves, being hyper independent, which in fact it is true, but we need to really find that balance between social connection and finding that stillness within ourselves. That is, I think, we are mostly suffering and kind of like having that contradictions in finding the balance on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. After this wonderful discussion, I really want to sum it up with one question now.
Okay.
After your more than 2 decades of experience,
yes,
witnessing people at their highest and lowest moments, if there's one lesson about being human that you wish every single person understood, what would it be?
I think, sorry to go back to it, but I think that no one is uniquely broken. Okay. A lot of people think that their pain means something. It means that something's wrong with them. That's what they think. The pain is there. There's something wrong with me. But so much of that pain is just being human. It's just existing on this spinning ball in the middle of the universe, in our galaxy, this little tiny ball. And, with everything that's going on around us, it's just being human. So it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that there's some things going on. Behind a lot of calm faces, they're all carrying some form of fear, some shame, and some self-doubt. They're not uniquely, it's not just happening to them, is what I'm trying to say. So what looks like a symptom is often just survival. But real strength is not about staying untouched by pain. It's about being wounded, and moving forward. And I think that's what most people fail to pick up on about themselves, that, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. Some people try to make their trauma worse than somebody else's, it does this, it does that. And it does make people feel a certain way. There's no denying that. But a lot of people feel the same way. I mean, you mentioned trauma before, going through lots of heavy trauma, which is, is true to a certain degree. I guess, there's people that probably argue being abandoned by your parents is a lot less traumatic than not being picked up from school on time, left to wait, at the bus stop. And on the surface, it does look like that. But the feelings can be exactly the same. The feelings of abandonment and separation and not being cared about can be just as traumatic. And I think that's what a lot of people fail to recognize, that the people that they're talking to have also experienced things, and that's why they've got the exposure to be able to talk to you about it. I think that's one thing in 25 years. A thing that people don't realize is that it's not a unique thing. There are answers for all of it, but it just comes down to what work they want to put into it as well. What do they want to take responsibility for?
I also feel like we are really hard on ourselves, like as we talked about the coping mechanisms and the different pathways our nervous system has learned throughout the years that we are exposed to a different environment.
Yeah.
Right now, as an adult or as a conscious being, we constantly are very hard on ourselves and onto why we're acting the way we're acting. Like, why am I like this? Why can't I just move on and not just think about all of this noise that's going on my mind?
Mm.
And look, we need to really give that grace and compassion to ourselves and say, look, this is not just me talking to me. This is actually what I've learned throughout these old years that needs time to be undone and to have a different perception and to unlearn. And
Yes.
One of the most prominent example for this would be insomnia. Like, we just think we are broken, like we can't sleep, and something is wrong with us at that immediate time frame. But a lot of that would be our survival instincts, kicking in, trying to keep us safe and alert. But we just tied back to something being broken or something being, just disoriented within ourselves.
And also, just looking at that insomnia part of it, if near enough everybody, 99% of everybody I've ever spoken to about sleep problems in the last 10, 15 years I will say, so what time do you go to bed? And they say, I go about 10 o'clock. And I say, oh, okay, so do you have trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep? And they go, I'll get into sleep. I go, okay, so what are you doing? Well, I'll sit there and, I'm in bed, I'm tossing and turning. I get up, I look at my phone, I scroll through my phone for a little while. And then, I try to get to sleep and I can't get to sleep. And, or they might say, I'll flick the TV on in the bedroom. And, I'll watch a Netflix show that might last 2 or 3 hours and then I'll try to go to sleep again. Hello? I just think to myself, not that they're stupid or anything, but it's like, your body's doing something there. You're looking at your phone and you're looking at your TV, which produces blue light. When you've got blue light, your body stops producing melatonin. It's a natural thing that we do. Our body produces melatonin when the sky goes dark, and that is one of the areas to switch our brains into sleep mode. If you're going to be stimulating yourself with coffee, cigarettes, drinking, looking at blue light, it's going to affect your sleep. It's as simple as that. Drink coffee after 4 o'clock. Don't smoke cigarettes after 8 o'clock. Don't watch TV after 9 o'clock. If you've got to get up at 7 o'clock. These are all the reasons you're tired. When things happen like that, it's not normally because you're broken. It's because your sleep hygiene's terrible, and you're suffering because you're reinforcing it. So you need to try.
Mhm.
You need to try and not reinforce it. And then if you're still having trouble sleeping after a month, then we'll talk about it, because nothing's going to change if you don't do anything about it.
Apart from linking insomnia, as we're talking the general example over here,
Yeah.
can we relate a problem or a disoriented thing like insomnia to what we have gone through during our childhood, let's say?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of people, like when they try to meditate, for instance, have a lot of difficulty closing their eyes, because closing your eyes, you're leaving yourself vulnerable because you don't know what's going to be coming at you. And that can be very triggering, for things like that. And some people might get more anxious at night time if bad things had happened to them as a child at night time. And they're things that you can work out with psychology. Trauma-based therapy would probably be a better thing, only because I think when you're dealing with sensitive subjects like that, and every subject's sensitive, but I think when you're dealing with subjects that are sensitive, that you need to be in a space where you are safe to open up and then be closed back down, not opened up and then left to go home. You need to be closed back down. It needs to be a very regimented type therapy. So therapy, it certainly does have its place. Talking therapy is great for that type of thing. But I think that as long as the therapy comes with solutions, then it makes it more valid. If it's just talking about what's going on, I think it will take longer.
Actually, necessarily does not mean that we are broken or we have some kind of disorders within ourselves. It actually links back to something very critical that our brain or nervous system has learned throughout these whole years to just protect ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And that symptom, poor sleep, the solution would have been maybe to try and stay awake as long as possible, that you feel exhausted and fall asleep. But now that exhaustion is carrying on till 4 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly it's a problem because you've got to get up at 6. You're not a kid anymore. You've got to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's now a problem. But it was really just a coping mechanism to start with. You're not broken.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
Yeah. As we move towards the ending of today's episode, Mark, I just wanted to say thank you again. Thank you for sharing not only your professional expertise with us today, but for also sharing your humanity with us. Because I think that's one of the things that has stood out to me throughout this entire conversation. Sometimes we separate mental health professionals from the rest of the society and almost view them as people who have all these answers. But from today's conversation, reminded me a lot, before anything else, we are simply all just human beings trying to understand ourselves and each other a little bit better.
Absolutely.
I also think today's conversation was a beautiful reminder that despite how different our lives may look externally, So many of us are carrying the same fears, asking the same questions, and ultimately searching for many of the same things. And perhaps being human is less about fixing ourselves and more about understanding ourselves with a little bit more compassion and grace. So, Mark, thank you for sharing decades of your experience, your wisdom, and your perspective with all of us today. I genuinely appreciate your time, and I'm so grateful that you were my very first guest here on Uncaged Mind.
Thank you very much, Kritika. I've really enjoyed doing it. It's been challenging for me to think about things as well. So,
No, you were absolutely fantastic. I'm very sure the viewers will love you. And to everyone listening right now, I also want to say that I'm really proud of you. I think the fact that you intentionally chose to spend your time listening to a conversation that's meant to deepen your understanding of yourself and life itself speaks volume about the kind of person you are. Because choosing self-awareness, curiosity, and growth is already setting a foundation for the person you're becoming. As always, my beautiful souls, thank you for spending your time with us. If today's episode resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who may need to hear it. And until next time, continue asking questions, continue exploring your mind, and continue uncasing the parts of yourself that were never meant to be confined in the first place. This is your Miss K, and I'll see you in the next episode.